Good afternoon. To begin this meeting of the Board of Education, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, in terms of the agenda, there is one change, which is first we'll do the resolution in the matter of the district budget and the trans notes, and then we will do the administrative law judge decision, so reversing number 4 and number 3. I'll accept a motion to adopt the agenda. Move in second, and please vote.
Mr. Chairman, I have comments on this issue.
On the agenda?
No, on the agenda?
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was the item.
No,
sorry. Yeah.
Okay. I was just getting the approval of the agenda before we moved on to that.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. We will now go to number 4, which is the resolution in the matter of the district budget for 2012-13 and tax and revenue anticipation notes. I just want to make a couple of comments. First, we have consistently maintained a position as a board that we will balance our budget and that we will maintain local control of our school district. This has been the position of the board since November and December when we first began looking at the very severe budget problems, and we decided at that point that we were going to do whatever it takes to continue to balance the budget and maintain local control of our district. The reason we're having this item on the agenda tonight is there have been some public comments made about the financial state of the district, and this is to reassure both the public and Wall Street that we are maintaining the same position as a board, that we are not prepared to go into debt to the state, that we are not going to take out a state loan. We do not see that as a solution to our problem. We know there are very tough choices to make, and we're not afraid to make those choices to save our schools in San Diego. So that everybody is clear, I will read what the resolution is. Whereas the district will be seeking to issue tax and revenue anticipation notes in June 2012 to assist with cash flow management for fiscal year 2012-13, and whereas the board adopted a plan on March 13, 2012, by 5-0 vote, to balance the budget for fiscal year 2012-13, accepted by the San Diego County Office of Education under its oversight authority under Education Code Section 42131, and whereas the district is taking all steps necessary, including making significant staff reductions and other expenditure reductions, and seeking revenue to achieve this plan, and whereas, despite 4 years of declining revenues from the state of California, the district projects to end fiscal year 2011-12 with the required statutory reserve of 2%, other required set-aside funds, and additional unappropriated funds. And whereas the Board of Education will adopt a balanced budget on or before June 30th, 2012 for the 2012-13 fiscal year, with at least the statutory reserve of 2% and other set-aside funds, and whereas any other course of action would cause the Board of Education to lose local control of the district and lead to further deterioration of the educational program. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education has not sought and does not plan to seek an emergency apportionment, i.e. loan, from the state of California in the fiscal year 2012-13 under Education Code Section 41320 and 41328. Be it further resolved that the Board of Education is committed to keeping the district fiscally sound during difficult economic times. Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments? Okay, please vote. Comments. Okay.
Mr. President. First of all, I think we could check the minutes. I don't believe I've voted since December for the proposed budget. I did vote for the issue, the next item on the agenda regarding the layoff notices in March. But anyhow, this board has a lot of resolutions that comes before it. We've had resolutions on Asian Pacific Islander Month. We've had resolutions on Harvey Milk Day. We've had resolutions on biodiesel. This resolution is a lot different than those types of resolutions. Why is that? Well, when I was coming down here today, I was listening to the fact that, well, you know, J.P. Morgan's lost several $1 billion, and the Senate's having hearings today. And the key issues that are coming out of it are two things: financial disclosure and public transparency. Those are the two issues that we have our fiduciary responsibility as board members. And I was reminded, Mr. President, of the city of San Diego just a few years ago when they adopted a financial statement to approve sewer revenue bonds that would be paid off based on sewer revenues. And they neglected to mention the extent of the financial problem of the pension shortfall that was facing the district. Well, we all know what happened subsequently to that. The city, the Security Exchange Commission came in and investigated. The city was out of the bond market, could not issue any debt for a number of years, and just got back in. The council at times said they were following the advice of the experts, all who lost their jobs, their financial manager, their treasurer. They were all litigated and ultimately lost their honor. So what does that have to do with this before us tonight? The Security Exchange Commission has tightened their rules since then on being honest of what we're telling the public. So those of us who, when we watch the shows on crime shows and someone's sworn in, they're asked to tell whether they tell the truth or the whole truth or nothing but the truth. This resolution, we are saying as board members to the financial markets that this is an accurate assessment of our financial condition. Well, number one, since the board acted in, so let's look at the items that the president read here. Let's look at the item. The district is taking all steps necessary, including making significant staff reductions and other expenditure reductions, and seeking revenues to achieve this plan. Well, that's true. But it doesn't mention that we're increasing spending by $60 million, increased costs by $60 million. Maybe that's not an important issue. The resolution says that despite 4 years of declining revenues, the state of California, we are going to have statutory reserves of 2%. Well, that's true, but the superintendent just recently sent the board a memo. And Ron Little, our recent CFO, wrote that unified districts across California have an average reserve of 15%. This district, and I'm quoting, our 2010-11 general fund reserve, this is a quote, was 8.5%, half of the state average, well below the state average for unified school districts. And he also goes on to say that at the end of this fiscal year, our reserve will drop to 5% general fund reserve level, which will quickly be utilized to mitigate next year's significant budget gap. Now, if you're telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, yes, it's true we're going to have our statutory required 2% reserve. But it's also true that we are spending down our cash on hand. Lastly, I think it's important to know that the President mentioned that any other course of action, meaning if we do not approve the layoffs tonight, and we go towards insolvency, that's the course of action, would cause us to lose local control. That's correct. The 6 of us up here would lose our jobs, 5 school board members and the superintendent. But it also says it would lead to further deterioration of educational programs by taking that action. Well, in fact, what the board's proposing is eliminating 1,600 positions, which I think all of us will say will deteriorate our educational program, where if we don't do that, so this is not I believe this is untrue. The board, of course, so I think it's important, a cautionary tale for my colleagues. This is not a resolution about the Boy Scouts or a Asian Heritage Month. This is something where you are stating to the bond markets, who we are going to go and borrow money from, that this is an accurate assessment of our finances. And I believe it's not true, and I will not support the resolution for that reason. Thank you.
Are there any other board comments? I just want to reiterate that this resolution does state the truth. It's the reality that we are in a very difficult situation, and that this board is committed to making the decisions that we have to make to preserve local control of our schools, which is going to lead to the salvation of our educational program here in San Diego. Okay. If there are no further comments, please vote on the resolution. Okay, that passes 4-1. Okay, we will now move on to item 3, which is the Administrative Law Judge's proposed decision to be adopted as the final decision of the Board of Education. What we will do is we will hear a presentation by the superintendent and his staff regarding what has happened since the March 15th preliminary layoff notices to arrive at this point. And then we will hear public testimony, and then we will have board discussion. So, Superintendent Koba, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, President Evans. I want to set the context for what is a very difficult discussion, a very difficult topic, and then follow up with our General Counsel, Mr. Larry Shanke, and our Chief HR Officer, Mont Jackson, to provide additional information, technical perspective. Tonight we're here to present a final layoff notice for the 2012-13 budget balancing. We've had 5 years of very severe declining general fund revenues. We've had to cut hundreds of millions of dollars. That's a matter of public record, and a series of tough decisions made over the last several fiscal years. And we currently face the 2012-13 balancing requirement of cutting the expenditures by another $122 million based on current information. Through all that very deep, prolonged reduction in our budget, we have arrived at a place where about 90% of the general fund is today comprised of personnel accounts, either our health benefit plans or our compensation, our salaries. There was a time when that percentage would have been in the upper 70s, low 80 percentile, where in stable, enduring times it is for most school districts. But today it's in the area of 90% plus. In January of this year, the governor issued his proposed budget. Amongst the items listed in that budget was an intent to go to the voters in November for a tax measure. Guidance that we received from the County Office of Education resulted in us having to accommodate a failed measure at November's decision-making time, which results in adding $40 million to our deficit. That, in addition to some other compensation requirements, some structural requirements, some other programmatic deductions, added up to a $122 million reduction deficit for the 2012-13 budget. That situation has, in fact, deteriorated since January, as we have watched over the last several months as revenues, month after month, the tax expectations have fallen well below projection. The state deficit has grown from about $9 billion to $16 billion as the revenue projections have dipped way down. We're at a point here, while the governor announced a May revise last week, and assumptions were made during the first few days following his declaration that perhaps public education would either be held harmless or flat funding would prevail. In other words, minimal change. But as we have proceeded since last Monday, we've noted that the Department of Finance has had to make corrections to those original numbers to recalculate what the impacts are on public sector activities, and specifically in our case, public education. We are, at this point in time, trying to collect the data through our attendance at workshops, consultation with the county office, and discussion with other experts to come before the board and the community next week to update on our expected or projected or calculated deficit to balance the 12-13 budget. There are assumptions that instead of $122 million deficit, it may be $4 to $7 million more. But that is yet to be finalized based on reviews. We are among the county school districts that had to report qualified for our second interim by the 15th of March. That is a public acknowledgement that we may not be able to meet all of our financial commitments over the next couple of years. There are 1/4 or about 10 or 11 of the districts in this county in the same position as we are, 1/4, which is an all-time high. Just recently, the state announced that almost 180 some odd districts have either declared qualified or negative. We are approaching 20% of the school districts in this state that are in very difficult straits, just like San Diego Unified. I think we've reached a point where there is a new norm, where there are no options after a series of years of reductions, where there are debilitating, declining reserves on hand and quickly disappearing. We have reached a point with this new norm where, if you look back just 1 year, we had to permanently lay off almost 500 people, almost 200 of our certificated folks, and another couple of hundred of our classified individuals. Up to that juncture in time, we'd been able to avoid or minimize either the elimination of vacancies or the reduction of staffing figures, but the numbers had been small and few and far between over a series of years. So this new norm has placed us in a situation where we now talk about staffing reductions in the hundreds. We and many districts like us are walking a very fine line. We are dealing with the worst of situations, and just based on what I noted about the state, an ever-declining statewide budget issue, which certainly moves downhill quickly to the public sector. I do not see any new revenue coming anywhere in this budget adoption cycle by the state, coming down to the local level between now and the end of June or whenever the state and the governor finalize their budget. Rather, I expect that we will have to accommodate some reductions. And that is contrary to years and years of going from a January proposal to a May revise, where the expectation is either flat to positive, not flat to negative. The only revenue scenario positive that I see vaguely on the horizon may be in November. And that is based on the voters of this state approving a ballot measure. But even with the passage of that bill, the influx of new revenues, there are indications that we may not see any of that new funding to the latter part of the next year, May or June. And there are certain indications that even with a tax measure passed, there may still be a need for budget cuts, and that will all depend on how the state manages its own cash flow and, in fact, passes on any of its problems to the local level based on their ability to manage. So, November is way too late to make any decision about revenue, to prolong or avoid or suspend what has to be done to balance this budget by the 30th of June, our requirement levied on us by the state. We have been through deficit spending over the past few years. We cannot continue to be on that ramp without reaching zero. And that is what's driving the tough choices that the board has to make about layoffs, about programmatic reductions. We have to do so in order to stay in the game, in order to be able to provide for a view beyond the coming year. This PKS that we have introduced going back into the February-March timeframe is a very complicated document. While it rolls up to having over 1,000 people impacted, it involves many different factors, including seniority, credentials, skipping, categorical funding, programmatic accommodations, leave of absence, and more. An incredible number of moving parts that have to be considered. It's not as simple as simply rolling back 20 or 30 or one particular program because of the interdependencies and the multiple factors involved. So this PKS that has been developed had to be very, very tightly woven. And it was done with an extremely deep sensitivity to adding not one more or removing one less than what was properly needed to accommodate all the moving parts that I just mentioned. We cannot accommodate any tinkering with this proposal and yet be able to meet our adopted budget and at the same time factor in what we will determine to be the final impacts of the May revise. So I just want to have us all recognize the context. We are here tonight because of what began over 4 years ago in terms of reductions, and we kept it as far away as we could from the personnel accounts, whether they be the central office or the campuses. It was all about tackling the stuff. But we've reached the point in time where we are now directly impacting, and have been so, our staff. So that's the context of the consideration tonight for the board. I now ask that the Chief HR and General Counsel come forward to provide some technical perspective.
Thank you, Superintendent Koba. If we can go ahead and have that slide up there. In the board documents, you'll find the proposed decision from the administrative law judge, who is an employee of the state of California in the Office of Administrative Hearings. If we take just a couple quick steps back to, I go all the way back to December when we adopted the first interim report, where we had a first indication that there was going to be even more concerns about funding than there were last year. If you all remember, I came here in April of 2011, and you were completing a layoff at that point that ended up affecting over 200 certificated employees, and actually more, as I'll explain when we get into this. When that process starts, the numbers, the Finance Department looks at the numbers. We wait for the governor's budget in January. The governor's budget in January was actually worse than what we had thought it was going to be in December. If you remember, Ron Little, the former CFO, generated a budget solutions list, and it was a list of a number of different things in different areas that could be reduced. The problem being is that most of the areas that could be cut, what we call the low-hanging fruit, the supplies, the contracts, the consultants, those kinds of things, have been cut beyond the point where it's functional. The only thing left, as Superintendent Koba pointed out, was employees, unfortunately. 90% of our budget's salary and benefits. If 90% of your budget's salary and benefits and you need to cut $100 million, you're going to have to cut $90 million of that. Simple math. During that process, well, I'm using the term FTE tonight, and unfortunately it's a shorthand that we've started to use, school lawyers and HR professionals. I know their FTEs are full-time equivalents, and I even hate to use the term because it sort of depersonalizes what's going on here. But it's something that we use to plan. In other words, it's the cost of one teacher, one counselor, one nurse, salaries and benefits. What does it cost us, full-time equivalent, because we have a number of part-time employees. They generate those numbers. Those numbers are given to Lamont Jackson and his staff, and they need to convert those into proper notices for the correct people that do not have the seniority or the credential to remain after the budget cuts are made. That process is extremely, extremely complicated, simply because every certificated employee has, by definition, a certificate. Some of them have more than one. Some of them have experience in other areas. Some of them are trained in a specific way. Some of them are more senior than others, obviously. Some of them were hired on the same day of first day of paid service. That is also another process that we have to undertake. Those numbers are converted. They're created a certain list of, we take the full-time equivalents and we identify the people attached to those what we call FTEs. Lamont's folks then generate that list, and we're required to do by March 15th of any given year, we're required to give written notice to every certificated employee for whom we do not have a budgeted position next year, and also any other employee for which we don't have service for next year. looking at this slide, I'll take you back to March 6th when you first saw this particular slide. The PKS, or particular kind of service total, was 1,265. There has been some confusion out there in the community about why is there, quote, 500 more notices than are necessary. Let me say, first of all, there are not 500 more notices than necessary. The notices that were given were the notices that were required by law. If we do not give a notice to a certificate employee by March 15th of any given year, they are guaranteed a job for the ensuing year. Guaranteed. We will have to pay their salary and benefits. Okay? So, we are given the task of determining 3.5 months before we adopt our budget, 3.5 months before the state adopts its budget, to determine who we can afford to pay for next year and who we can't. So, we do the best we can based on the information we have. As you can see up there, the smaller numbers, there was some comments concerning 1,085 FTE was the number that was needed to meet the budget solution that Mr. Little presented. That is correct to a point. It only relates to K-12, general fund, unrestricted. As all of you may remember, our budget consists of a number of different funds, primarily being the general fund, but there's a number of other funds too. So you adopted a PKS resolution that reflected 1,085 FTE for K-12 and 180 other FTE for the early childhood education reductions and some other staffing, basically what I call staff to enrollment. We know that our enrollment is deteriorating every year, so we cannot staff to the same level we had the year before. We have fewer children enrolled in the district. That is 1085 plus 180 is 1265. What we have is 245 leave of absence persons. That is something that to be honest with you, in my 30 years as a school attorney, I've never seen this before. The problem is, what was decided last year was to bring people back who had been laid off to serve for people who are on leave of absence. Bring them back as regular employees. In other words, once you bring a certificated employee back from layoff as a regular employee, they have a right to a hearing before you can reduce them for the following year. We have 245 people that are serving for people who are on leave of absence. In other words, they are entitled to that position. The 245 that are serving with us now technically have no position. They have no budgeted place in this. They have no place in this district for which we could find the salary and benefits to pay them. But because those folks are on leave of absence, we can bring these folks back. By law, we have to give them a notice for next year by March 15th to account for them. Mr. Jackson probably can talk a little more about what that number is going to be, but those require 245 notices. As you notice, we've taken out the skip information that you received on March 6th. That's 123. That was 123 more notices because the ALJ needed to determine whether or not we could skip certain areas, as the board directed us to look into language immersion, international baccalaureate, and the QEIA schools. The ALJ approved that skip. The ALJ approved all the numbers that we presented, and he's authorized us to give 1,534 notices. The reason the FTE of 1,510 is different than the notices, once again, we have a number of part-time employees. If you're a part-time employee, you still have a right to a notice. And in fact, those notice numbers would be higher, except for the fact that we rescinded 22 notices at the hearing because it was determined that, factually speaking, they were either more senior or possessed credentials that we weren't aware of on March 15th. So, that's the math. That's why there's 1,534 notices. The ALJ accepted everything that we presented. I want to say a couple of things. One, this is not a happy thing. It's not a joyous thing that we do. We do not like it. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've done over 50 teacher layoffs. I've never liked any one of them. But what we need to do is survive as a district to make sure that we can provide the education for those children who are here and pay the staff members that are going to stay here to do the job. Secondly, there is no way on this planet this would have been possible without the extremely, extremely hard work of the folks in human resources. These folks worked at night. They worked over the weekends. I don't know how they could have done it. They did it. And I have to give them credit for that. And with that, I would turn over to Mr. Jackson.
So to add a little bit, and certainly I appreciate the comments, but we have many teachers out here who work nights and weekends, and as Mr. Shanky said, this is not a great moment for anyone and such a difficult challenge for the school board. I would add only a few comments, and this goes to the staffing element. So as I've articulated, while we are going to, perhaps with board decision, notice 1,534, what I'm predicting, and this was conversation that I started last year when I arrived approximately this time, is really listening to what Bill Freeman had to say and what many of the board members said is this a reality? And the reality is that we still have folks who will take leave of absences. And currently we have approximately 130 long-term folks who are going on long-term leave of absences. And we're still in the midst of calculating the separations, what we talk about in terms of attrition. Now, I gave a presentation prior to March 6th, or on March 6th, that indicated that we need to think about these numbers when we're going into staffing. It doesn't help us today, but it certainly will at least give a better projection of what we're going to look like in September. And I would say that would include about a few hundred folks who are going to be noticed, who will be back in the classroom. And this is because they will replace folks who are going out the door or folks who are taking a leave of absence, a few hundred. Now, the difficulties, some would ask, why don't you rescind those notice or not lay those folks off? Well, the difficulty is we don't determine that. School sites do. School programs, master schedules determine that. And those master schedules, they begin their work in February, but they will not solidify their work, obviously, until the fourth Friday when the final numbers come in. And so we do have a long range or a gap there in terms of meeting budgetary needs, meeting statutory guidelines, and then meeting the ultimate staffing needs. And so I will say to the board, honestly, I don't see 1,534 out the door. I just can't tell you which few hundred will come back in the door. But we will certainly work to expedite that as we do the analysis of the post and bid and the staffing needs at each school. So I would add that. But I would go on record to say that I personally wouldn't I believe to the best of my ability to work these components of a layoff with the best of my ability, with integrity and respect. And certainly, as I've expressed, this is very difficult. And I know many folks in the audience, and this is not something that I would bring upon them if I didn't see a reason to, and I would push the board not to do something if I saw a reason not to do it. This is my district. I've grown up in this district. I'm a product of this district. And I know the hard work that these folks do because up until last year I was in the trenches with them. And this is very difficult. But I would go on record to say that we didn't overnotice. We did our job with integrity and with respect to the fact that we are impacting lives. And I would agree with Mr. Shanky that we didn't notice one more than we needed to. And as I said, unfortunately, when we do good work, it impacts lives. And certainly a few mistakes wouldn't hurt the lives of others, but that's just not in my makeup. That's not how I was raised through San Diego Unified.
Okay.
So I give you that. I
move staff recommendation.
Is there a second?
I'll second, but I'd like a slight amendment to the staff recommendation. The amendment would be that following Mr. Jackson's presentation, that we direct the superintendent and the staff that when a budgeted position becomes open that can be filled by a person who is being laid off, that the staff acts immediately to recall that person off the layoff list and fill that budgeted position, that the staff does not have to come back to the board for approval for that, and in fact acts immediately to move people off the layoff list and into those budgeted positions when they become available.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I will We will now go to public testimony, and then we will have board discussion at that point. We have a number of people who would like to speak. I'd like to ask you to be respectful of the time limit so that a lot of different people can speak. Based on the number of people, we should probably only allow 1 minute. However, because of the importance of this matter, I'm going to allow 2 minutes. So I would really request that you'll see the green light here, when you're up here as a speaker. For the first minute, when the yellow light comes on, please try to wrap up your comments so that you can finish before the buzzer goes off, because I don't like to cut people off in the middle of their point. So try to have your thoughts together as much as possible to present them within the 2 minutes so we can hear from as many members of the public as possible. I'm going to call some names. When I call the names, please come up and stand over here to the side, and anyone in the group of names I called can come up and speak first and speak in any order as long as your name is being called to come to the front of the auditorium. Michael Little, Dennis Shamp, Ashley Owen, and Lisa Ellis.
Good evening. I'm Mike Little. I'm a teacher at the Kearney School of International Business, and I've been there for 12 years. A piece of paper is going around with some information. You may have already got an email. And I'd like to highlight some of the significant points in my case so you can make an informed decision. I taught math for the district for 5 years, 2 of them under No Child Left Behind, and for the last 7 I've been teaching business. I received a layoff notice because the district ignored my math credential. When I inquired why, I found out it was because they added a requirement that I have a certificate of No Child Left Behind compliance on file. One's not required for teaching business. When I found out I needed to have this paper on file, I filled it out, attesting to the fact that I had taught math for 5 years and have the credential. And I submitted that form within 24 hours, but was told it was too late. As far as I know I'm the only one being laid off under these circumstances. So it really comes down to this. If the district staff adds a condition of employment outside of our contract, doesn't it have the obligation to inform me of it? And secondly, if I find out about this condition and comply within 24 hours, isn't that soon enough?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Dennis Shamp, SDA board member, 9-year teacher, 4th layoff notice. Every March, my neighbors watch the news and listen to the annual announcement of the school budget woes, and they ask me, with all of this turmoil, why did I become a teacher? Without hesitation, my answer is always the same, is that I believe in education. As a product of city schools myself, class of 79, Claremont High. Go Chieftains. But to be told for a 4th time in 5 years that I'm being fired, to be told that my passion, my training, my expertise are just not enough anymore to keep me employed. There's only so much one man can take year after year. This back and forth nonsense of the firing and the hiring and the firing and the hiring has to stop. This was supposed to be my last career. I'm 50. This is my legacy. Instead, I'm left wondering if come September I'll be in a classroom or a shelter. We cannot sacrifice our education. We've made too many compromises already. Sacramento reduces our funding, and we fall back. We issue annual pink slips, and we fall back. It's time to tell Sacramento to put education first. Tell the powers that be, not again. The line must be drawn here. This far, no further. You have our promise that we will help you draw that line and enforce it. Don't let our passion die. Vote to keep the schools properly and safely staffed come September. My family would be extremely grateful.
Good evening. I don't see Ashley Owen, so I'm stepping up. My name's Lisa Ellis. I'm the graduation coach at Sarah High School. I hope you remember me from last year where Erica Glenn and I came to you in good faith representing the graduation coaches, voluntarily taking a contract and financial pay reduction to save 20 jobs, 20 high schools with their credit recovery program, dropout prevention. We're the only dropout prevention program in the district. Last year, we offered to reduce our contract by 1 month. You took 2. But you kept our jobs. It's important. Our graduation rate at Sarah this year is 98%. It's unprecedented. Last month, you approved an additional $2.2 million to renew our online learning contract with Apex Learning Incorporated. Through the learning contract through 2015, you're cutting the people that implement the program, the people with the training, the people who save these children. You can't cut the only people with the training to do this. We do credit recovery, iHigh dual enrollment, AP exam review, CASI prep. Our results are outstanding. I'm so frustrated. Sarah has the highest military population in San Diego County. We have an additional $2.2 million from the Department of Defense for our kids to do online learning, not only at Sarah, but throughout San Diego Unified School District. We get 2 military kids, we get 1 free civilian. These kids have a free opportunity to get their education, yet you're yanking the professionals out of the program that has been implemented for them. Last year, we reached a side letter of agreement with the school board and SDEA to keep the graduation coaches. Our position is funded. You're paying for us. We are not excessed. We're not unpaid. The funding is there. You cannot take these people out of this program. We're the only dropout prevention in the district. These kids are going to go nowhere.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to thank the speakers for watching the time limits and also for your civility in this conversation. Citizen Joanne Fields, Jason Hundley, Michelle Sanchez, and Camille Zambro.
Start out.
Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Joanne Fields. I'm a member of the Filipino American Caucus and the Public Relations Officer for Philameda Filipino Educators Association. Most importantly, I'm a mother of 4 Filipino Mestizo African American students. I'm glad that you mentioned this is Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Under that huge umbrella, if I say Asian, what do you think of first? It's usually Japanese, Korean. If I say Pacific Islander, it's usually Samoan or Hawaiian, but never Filipino. So let me tell you about the Filipino community in your school district. 47% are Filipino at Morse, 37% at Bell. They have the highest API test scores at both of these schools. And why is that? It's because of the Filipino language teachers that give them the pride and the excitement of being Filipino to excel and also to share our culture and heritage out in the community. I started the largest Filipino festival in San Diego County by tapping in to the Filipino language class there. We had non-Filipinos march with us at this recent Philippine parade this past Saturday with the Filipino language class teachers who brought 130 from Bell on a Saturday morning and 150 from Morse. Who does that? These teachers do that on their off time, organizing the students and their families to connect them on campus, in the community, and for all of us to share, not just the Filipinos, but so that you can learn who we are, why are we proud of our contributions to the history of San Diego, and I hope that you do not cut the 2 teachers that you have served pink slips to at these schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to speak to the process by which employees were selected for layoffs, and I feel that that process does not reflect a well-thought-out district educational plan. I'll give you an example. A teacher is going to lose a job, and yet Scripps Ranch employs a football coach with no credential. I want to know why Lisa Ellis, an excellent graduation coach, I've seen her interact with children, is losing her job, but we've got somebody with no college degree teaching events planning. Now, how is that making it a priority to have the teachers that are providing the core services that our children need? There are lots of examples of this that I don't think that the district looked at adequately, just allowing the principals to make selections without somebody at the district looking at the master schedules and seeing what was core and what was really necessary is needed. I mean, I just don't think that we need to pay a football coach $60,000 a year for the football program, that when people are losing their jobs.
Hi, Michelle Sanchez. Hello. I'm sad and disappointed to be at this point again, fourth time in 5 years. We're told every year this year is different. History shows us this is not different because the simple fact is, if we have students, we need educators to safely run our schools and to make sure our schools are functional. And the district plays this game every year, laying people off like myself. For what? For the district to go, whoops, we actually need educators when the doors open up come September. And whether it's September or November, when the district actually decides to hire us back as teachers, not as subs, are we going to be at the same school site that we poured our heart and soul into? I don't know. What I do know is that many educators like me work hard to make the schools that we work at a better place by building programs, being involved in encouraging our students to do their best, and these students depend on these relationships to get them through. It's sad and frustrating to play this game, and you know who is hurt the hardest is the students and the families. I know you'd say it's numbers, but Ron Little admitted under oath that there were hundreds of people over-noticed. Why haven't they been recalled? Every year, our district has carried a surplus of money. Use it. Another factor is attrition, and the list goes on. Stop playing political games with the lives of our employees and our district and the future of our children. Resend the notices now, not later.
Good evening. I'm Camille Zombro. My contact information is on file. For the last 5 years, you and your predecessors have voted to tear the heart out of our schools each spring. Despite financial reports which consistently show tens of millions of dollars of extra reserve funding, you empty our nursing and counseling offices, our libraries, you gut our support and maintenance staff, and you stuff our classrooms with more and more students until teaching, learning, and the core of the journey through youth is compromised for thousands of our community's children. You asked us to look at your budget to help you wield your scalpel when you know as well as we do that this well-padded, expertly crafted budget has been designed to hide the fat, the waste, the bureaucracy, and your pet programs. No one can look at these pages and tell you what to cut because your finance staff know better than rank-and-file educators how to manipulate the numbers and tell the only story you know how to tell, that the only way to balance your budget is on the backs of our families and our children. But we don't believe you. We need only look back at history to know that you'll be sitting once again on tens of millions of dollars you took from our pockets and from our students. So enough. Stop the layoffs. Stand with us to protect our classrooms, because our families aren't the reason you dug yourself into this hole. So stop expecting our families to get you out of it.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Hanley, please.
Good evening. My name is Jason Hanley. My address is on file. I'm here to speak about the skipping. If you vote to allow skipping, please remember the following items. A, the teachers allowed to come back will no longer have a choice in the future where they might want to teach. They are stuck, which leads to possible burnouts or disgruntled employees. Because once you bring them back, because they've been skipped 5 years, they know they're not going to leave. They might want to leave. They won't have a choice. They will have to stay. You don't want that. Second, what happens when the school is no longer a school improvement? Does the teacher then get put back into the pool? I mean, they went to the QEI training. School comes out of improvement. Do you turn around and say, now you're back in the pool because you're out of school improvement? These are things you guys need to think about. Think about all the money the district has invested on all the teachers that have been skipped. The amount of money invested on the skipped teachers probably is close to double or triple the amount to sending a teacher to an IB training or a QUI training or an APEX training. I'm APEX certified. I remember went to one-day training. Okay, what happens to the teachers who are being excessed that work for an IB or QEIA school? They have the best of both worlds. They get to keep their job and also now get first priority openings when they get excessed. That's not fair. By voting yes, you are telling the non-skip teachers that their credentials, as well as the school that they teach at, are second tier and are pretty much worthless. You got to think about that. You're opening up a can of worms by voting yes, and it's a can you'll never shut. So you guys need to make sure you think about that, because there's plenty of things that can happen if you allow skipping to take place. Second, last time I checked, when I got my credential, or my wife got her credential, nowhere did it say I got an IB credential. Nowhere did it say that I got a QEIA credential. Nowhere did it say that I got an APEX credential. It says I got a teaching credential in the state of California. All these other teachers that you're allowing to be done.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call a few more people. Please come to the front and speak in any order. Shane Parmalee, Emily Neidhart, David Hickenbottom, Jennifer Ismario, Joshua Aaron Martinez. Go ahead. Any person that I call can go up and speak. Just give your name, please.
My name is David Hickenbottom. I live at 4411 McClintock Street.
Thank you.
I'm speaking as one of the 1,600 or so certificated teachers who will soon be searching for work. As a 10-year veteran of this district, I stand before you disenfranchised, dejected, and disrespected. I've worked tirelessly for this district for 10 years. My dedication and hard work has been rewarded with a pink slip. To add insult to injury, I've been asked to work the last 21 days of my year for sub-pay without benefits. Okay, you claim to want to save our schools. How does laying off 1 in 4 educators in this district save our schools? Each one of those notices you're given has a face and a life. Okay, they possibly have a family. They have bills to pay, a car payment, a mortgage or rent to pay, food to buy. Each slip represents someone's hopes and dreams. By laying us off, you're sacrificing the safety, health, and success of the students in this district. Okay? Without us, your classrooms will be overcrowded. There'll be insufficient adult supervision to keep our campuses safe. There won't be enough counselors to provide support for struggling students or adequate health services for students in need. I've heard each board member say how difficult this process has been. If it's so painful, why do it to us every year? Why continue down this path? Okay. Why not immediately rescind 500 layoff notices your CFO admits are unnecessary, and then work with the union in good faith to keep all of our jobs? Why send 973 more classified notices, right? When Ron Little has admitted you guys have a $71 million surplus over the required reserves next year. I wish to leave you with the words of board member Kevin Beiser on your district website. As a teacher, I see firsthand the success that occurs when we keep class sizes small. Our children shouldn't pay for our budget mistakes with their education. Okay. Mr. Beiser and other board members, actions speak louder than words. Your actions the last few years have been hypocritical at worst, disingenuous at best.
Hello, good evening. My name is Joshua Martinez. I'm from Bell Middle School. I'm an 8th grader, and I don't know too much about the statistics and the information that has to go with the layoffs, but what I do know is children are our future, and we need teachers to become a future. Teachers teach us what we need to do to become the people who fill your positions now. What would we do if we don't have them? I'd just like you to think about the things you're doing. When you lay off our teachers, you hurt us, because teaching is a hard job. It's not something that comes easily. Teachers are the people who have to deal with us when we're in our good days and our bad. I'm not the easiest student to get along with, but my teachers do it. They're another place to turn to when we can't go to our friends or when we can't go home. Teachers help us emotionally and academically. If you remove them, then you remove us. There is no future without us. Another thing, I'm president of UPAC, which stands for Union of Pan-Asian Communities. I'm vice president of WEB. I couldn't be those things without my teachers. They're the ones who give me the confidence to do what I do. They're the ones who help me. They give me the determination to do what I do. I would be the most depressed student ever to see my teachers get laid off. I would cry for them and I would rally for them. I would just like you to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Shane Parmalee. I teach at Garfield High School and Twain High School, and I'm a parent of 2 Boone Elementary School students. The only reason the state gives our district money is so that it can provide schools for the children of San Diego. That's it. My children attend Boone Elementary. This year, Boone Elementary does not have a school library. 600 kids, Title I school, no library. But it does have an area superintendent. When the superintendent says that 90% of our budget is spent on personnel, I wonder which personnel he's talking about. I would please find out what the actual percentage of our tax dollars are that are spent on the actual school sites. Don't let the district divert dollars from our schools in order to maintain six-figure salary positions at the district level. You talk about create. I went to the Morris Cluster meeting. You talk about creating quality schools in all communities, but the only way you can speak credibly on this claim is that if you adequately staff our schools with employees that earn reasonable wages. When you grossly underpay our teachers and treat them so badly decade after decade, you send a crystal clear message that that San Diego Unified is the last place you should send your kids to school and the last place you should ever apply for a job as a teacher. And that was the first piece I was a pre-intern for 2 years, I was an intern for 2 years, and then I had BITSA for 2 years. And every single district-appointed mentor that I had whispered the same piece of advice in my ear, and it was, get out of this district as soon as you can. Go teach in Sweetwater. You're a really good teacher. You work really well with English learners. You work well with at-risk kids. That's what I've devoted my life to doing. And the truth is, that's the same advice I would give everybody else. This is the last place right now because you treat us so badly, and it's not just now.
Hi, Emily Neidhart. I'm a teacher at Garfield High School. I've also taught at Sarah and Lincoln. I've been a teacher in the San Diego Unified School District for 12 years. When I started teaching, they needed teachers. I had a contract before I was placed at a site, and it was nice. It was nice to be able to focus on my lessons each day instead of having to worry about whether I would be fired at the end of the year. And that was hard enough. Being a new teacher is a demanding job, and many teachers leave the profession after only a few years. Unfortunately, uncertainty is precisely what new teachers are going through, and I can't even imagine the stress of living like that. I know the economy is hurting. I understand that. But how can a district be okay with no nurses? We have expectant teens and infants at our site, and a nurse once a week. If you call out school, if you call our school, there's a good chance that no one will answer because our secretaries are gone. We, the educators, took a pay cut to help out the district. Don't default on your end of the bargain. As professionals, we deserve the respect of the district and the community. Stop playing games with new teachers' careers. Stop playing games with our students' education. Stop budgeting on worst-case scenarios and be realistic. Bring back our nurses, our teachers, and our much-needed classified staff. Please rescind all layoffs.
I am Jennifer Ismerio. Thank you, members of the board, for allowing me to come before you tonight. I am a mother of 4 children, all of whom are or were students of Johnson Elementary School in your district. I understand the financial situation of our country down to the local level has changed. My oldest has Asperger's, a highly functioning form of autism. In Lakeside School District, Moses turned in 1/3 of his schoolwork and refused to write anything, including his name. He was passed to the next grade because he knew what he needed to know. Since beginning at Johnson in this school district, his teacher not only has Moses writing his name, Moses is writing paragraphs. That teacher's on your layoff list. The impact of all of these changes will significantly change the current academic and social atmosphere in Emerald Hills, where Johnson's located. Our demographics are at the bottom of this paper. How can kids be expected to learn in crowded classrooms? How can these kids learn so much with so much transition and loss of staff? I am sure that I am not alone in this decision, but if this decision to lay off 9 out of the 20 general education teachers at Johnson is approved, I will be homeschooling all 4 of my children next school year. They deserve better than what you are proposing. Have you tried everything? Ridiculous or realistic options? Have you looked into altering school schedules, reducing utilities, sponsorships, partnerships for schools? Only essential personnel, something. Can you look at this room full of community and school representatives in our eyes and promise you have absolutely done everything to prevent the layoffs of even a single teacher? 9 out of 20 general education teachers have received notices of being laid off. If you approve these layoffs tonight at Johnson alone, that's almost half our staff.
Thank you. Okay, Gary Edmonds, David Irving, Jacqueline Magat, Ivy Dulay, and Tommy Flanagan. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jacqueline Magat, Vice President of Filipino American Educators Association. I came here when I was 15 years old and from the Philippines with limited English. Because of my Filipino language teacher, Mrs. Idos, she pushed me to go to college while my friends are in gangs. And when I went to college, I'm a recipient of the Future Educators of America Scholarship from the San Diego Education Fund. I've been teaching now for 8 years. I'm doing what my former teacher, my former Filipino teacher did. We're going to a lot of community events, feed the homeless. Community cleanups, going to, on our weekends, me and my students would go to home cares to perform for the elderly. Also, I'm Bell Middle School's Teacher of the Year and semi-finalist for the district. I received it the same time as my layoff notice. 2 years ago, I'm ASB advisor, yearbook advisor, Gawad Kalinga advisor, web advisor, UPAC advisor with 5 classes of Filipino. This year I'm doing Filipino and math support, and I'm still the advisor for those clubs. But this year again, I'm receiving a layoff notice. And this year it's different. It feels like it's not only me who's in jeopardy. The Filipino classes is also in jeopardy. I'm the most in the district. I'm the most experienced, 8 years, but still, I got a pink slip. So please, don't cut our program and no layoffs to any of our teachers. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ivy Dulay, and I am a product of Filipino language classes here in San Diego. I graduated as a student commencement speaker in 2007 at UCSD, and it was the pivotal moment of my Filipino language classes where I really started to appreciate myself. For the background of the Philippines, there's been English and there's been Spanish going there. What better would it be for anyone to learn Filipino in a population such as San Diego? I have worked at a nonprofit in Los Angeles. I see the needs of struggles of language access in reaching social services, in reaching classes, in parent involvement. I strongly believe that the Filipino language teachers must stay in their positions and continue to do the great work like Miss Jackie had mentioned earlier. I'm currently taking my master's in dual language development at Cal State Long Beach. When I heard about this, there was no hesitation. I wanted to come here right away. I understand that there is an issue here of finances and you have your responsibilities, and it is also an issue of ethics. I know that there is a huge, diverse population that you represent here of hardworking teachers, and I ask you to please consider the population that you are representing and the needs of our community. Again, learning the Filipino language has always been open to everyone. There has been many other choices, but Filipino language is here. It is necessary for this community, and I strongly encourage you to reconsider the needs of the community. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Board. My name is Dave Irving, and I just have to say I started out the year by coming and talking to you, and I'm sure you remember. There was 14 teachers that were behind me that had been laid off that were currently working as substitute teachers to fill the positions that they were laid off from. A chaotic position to be in, as a school, trying to start up in chaos with teachers filling their own positions as subs, wondering whether or not they're going to get to continue to teach throughout the year or get their benefits back, afford living, and teach. Okay? I wish Joshua were still here. He had to leave, which is understandable because the meeting started at 7. But I would like to say to him that I don't understand the numbers either, and it depends on who you talk to. It really does. I mean, we just got an indication of that tonight. But if there's $8 million left in reserves, why not spend down to $1 million, which is what the governor says that we can do, right? To keep the teachers in the classroom. Because I'm a pretty simple person, but to me, with school, you have to have children to teach, and you have to have teachers to teach. And the best teacher to have teaching is one that wants to be there and is not disenfranchised and over the process. This room is a reflection of how beaten down the teachers are. When you're getting ready to perhaps pink slip 1,500 teachers, you think there'd be more people here. But this is an indication of how beat down people are, and I don't think you want to do that. Please, I mean, I walk away from here sometimes thinking I'm crazy, saying things like, do the right thing. But do the right thing. Please, spend down to the last dollar that you're allowed to spend and face next year as it comes. Because this year is all that some of us have. This year is important. Every year is important.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good evening. Tommy Flanagan, middle school history and social justice teacher at Bethune K-8. My address and such is on file. I stand before you tonight to plead with you to please rescind a minimum of 500 pink slips that the district, by its own admission, says were not necessary. Ultimately, all of them to be rescinded. I'd like the district to take a hard look, at unnecessary costs, such as acuity, MAPS testing, data director, learning upgrade. I want to know what the cost is of these meaningless, and yes, meaningless assessments, and how many teachers could be saved with that money. I urge you tonight. It's right there. I'm wondering at this point whether I'm a teacher or a test proctor. These tests do not in any way measure critical thinking, the intangible that can't be measured on a bubble test or a computer assessment putting money in Bill Gates' pocket. The kind of thinking to put us on the moon, and the kind of outside-the-box thinking that will allow us to find budget solutions. There is plenty of money in Sacramento, in California. We've got idiots on both sides of the aisle. Please join us in getting that money from the 1%. Our children deserve nothing less. Thank you.
Okay, and finally, to finish this up, we have Andy Zafudo, Moses Ismario, and Stephen Greenwald.
Hello, good evening. I'm Andy Zafudo. I teach world history at University City High School. For 10 years, I sacrificed for this district as a substitute teacher, and for 4 years as a contracted teacher. My wife and I have used all of our 401k. We have no savings account. We live paycheck to paycheck. Call it poor planning on my part. I accept that. But I gave you a loan in 2010. I gave you my pay raises as a loan, and this is how I'm paid back. I'm going to be laid off because you can't pay me back. How are you going to be able to get loans with this kind of credit rating? Mr. Barnett, I commend you. You're a brave man. But I cannot say that I thank you for what you're doing to us. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm a candidate for mayor of the city of San Diego. My name's Stephen Greenwald. And a happy employee is a productive employee. You're hearing passionate teachers or professional people that can lose their passion and not be productive and not be happy. I think this board really has to speak out to the Governor Brown and tell him that he really has to get going on jobs and creating productivity and increasing the gross national product of the state of California. By doing that, there won't be any pink slips, and we'll have a sustainable tax revenue base for many years. This board has to tell him in no uncertain terms that he has to increase the gross national product. No increases in taxes. Increase your gross national product by creating new industries, growing your present industry, stop outsourcing, especially by our largest corporation, which is Apple Corporation. I'm still trying to figure out what happened to that $15 million. We should get Apple to donate $150 million. No pink slips for any of these passionate, professional teachers. That's my point, and that's the basics. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Moses Mario. I'm a 5th grader at Johnson Elementary. I may not know about all that financial and budgeting stuff, but what I do know is that excellent teachers lose their jobs, and this is a constant problem. What I think is weird is that we do stuff one year, but the next year, well, let's just say we don't do it. You're losing teachers. I lost my engineering teacher. So now my school, that was a STEM, is now a STEM. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Gary Edmonds. I'm a social studies teacher from Garfield High School and a proud member of SDEA. Respecting the superintendent and the Board of Education, your CFO confirmed that you laid off 400 more teachers than needed at layoff hearings. We ask that you at least rescind that number tonight. And on a personal note, my wife has battled breast cancer for the last 2 years. And I'm thankful for my health insurance. I'm so grateful. And in that spirit, please protect the health and the lives of the 1,655 who have been laid off by extending their health care, their lifeline, until December. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the public comment on this agenda item. We have a motion on the floor. Are there any other comments by board members? Mr. Beiser?
Yeah, I do have a couple comments real quick. This budget is a function of two things that a lot of you and a lot of the board members already know. First of all, it's a function of revenue. And the reality is that Sacramento has illegally underfunded public education per Prop 98. The intent of the voters when California passed Prop 98 is being violated by our representatives in Sacramento and by the governor. Second, this is a function of expenses. We are required by law to be fiscally responsible and balance this budget. We are required to have a 2% reserve. God knows that the teachers and the support staff deserve more money. That is not up for discussion in my book. That's one of the reasons why we have got to focus on rewarding the people that are working in the school district so that we can be competitive in the job market. As one speaker mentioned earlier, that we're not competitive in this county of 41 school districts. We have to be more competitive in the job market, and that means compensate educators and staff better. One thing that has become infinitely clear to me is that if we fail to demonstrate our ability to balance the budget, the County Office of Education will not wait a week. They will not wait a month. They will take over the school district immediately. What that means is then there will be loans with the state which will have incredible interest attached to them, costing taxpayers more money. That's money then that the state, who takes over the school district, would suck out of our classrooms to pay the interest on that loan. Second, we would lose all control, the board and the bargaining units, over the direction of the future of educational programs and the school district. And I don't honestly think anybody really wants that. There's some questions about whether or not we're working together to solve the problem. And while we do have ongoing impacts and effects negotiations, those only pertain to how we lay off people. Those negotiations have nothing to do with how to save jobs and prevent layoffs. Second, some people have said we refuse to reopen the contract, and we have never asked to reopen the contract. One person that spoke this evening said that in a side letter agreement, we kept graduation coaches. That's what we can do. That's an option if and only if the leadership of CSEA and SDEA are willing to entertain the idea of even sitting down and talking about a side letter agreement. It does not require reopening any contracts. We have to make a decision, because what's happening in this school district in San Diego Unified is people are not talking about solutions. There are other school districts in San Diego County that have been working out proposals for no layoffs. Just last week, there were several bargaining units in other school districts that sat down and worked out deals so there will be no layoffs in those school districts in San Diego County. We have until July 1st to try to figure out whether or not we are serious about learning how to deal with this problem together, collaboratively. That's what we expect for our kids, our students. When there's a problem, we want them to get together and work it out and figure out what are some of the solutions. We don't want the kids to name call, attack personally. We want them to talk about the problems and the issues and to think about what are solutions. But in order for us to get there as adults, as a good example for the kids, we first have to start talking about the issues and ideas to solve them. And so I am hopeful that we still have time. We still have time. Hopefully, the adults in this city will do what we can to solve these problems to benefit the kids. And for those reasons, I will be supporting the only option that I see in front of me, and that's the staff recommendation.
Barnett.
First of all, I'd like to, this is the second year that I've been through this process, and I do want to thank the superintendent and Mr. Shanky, our new general counsel, and Mr. Lamont Jackson, who, as awful as this process is for the individuals, it at least is clearer, it's, I believe, fairer, and it's organized, it makes sense, we understand it. And that, a lot of credit goes to the staff members who have the worst job in the district to have to do that. Secondly, I would like to personally, and I've had many emails from teachers and counselors and others the last few months, as we all have, apologize for the stress that all of you who have received these notices has added to your lives and your families, and I know it is awful on top of the stress that you have of teaching my kids and 114,000 other kids. So I do appreciate that. What this is about tonight, and it was summed up by 3 different comments her staff made, is about whether or not the San Diego Unified School District, as we know it, survives. That's what our attorney said, whether we survive as a district as we are constituted now, whether we stay in the game, as the superintendent said, or whether we live to fight another day. And in order to survive, we're told we need to do the responsible thing. I've been told we need to do the responsible thing. The responsible thing, obviously, is to pay your bills next year. And the responsible way to do that is to cut costs. Some $120 million shortfall next year, of which about $60 million is increased expenditures, actually, even with the cuts. So this responsible thing will mean we'll have 40 to 50 kids in high school and 30 to 40 in middle school and 30 in elementary school. And you know, the individual impacts of the 1,600, 150 child development teachers, 126 reading language arts, 25 social science, 40 foreign language, 725 general subject elementary, 70 mathematics, 67 PE, 43 general science, 64 counselors, 41 nurses, 40 other rehab counselors, 58 special education, and some 60 visual and performing arts at various schools, and many more I haven't mentioned add up to the 1,600. And this is, so doing these layoffs, of course, will balance the budget, right? Because it's a responsible thing to do. No, because this doesn't balance the budget. After doing the 1,600 layoffs that the board is poised to do tonight, in order to balance the budget next year, we still, according to our budget, have to sell $20 million of real estate assets that are older than everyone sitting on this panel up here tonight that the district has owned in a fire sale, and we also are going to take our carryover cash from in the $20 million range to less than $100,000. We are spending that cash, and that would, in theory, allow us to pay our bills this year and get us through to survive, to fight another day. Well, what it does is then gets us to the next year where we have, guess what, a $97 million shortfall. And we've already used up all our cash, we've already sold these assets, and we've laid off 1,600 people. And part of the ways to solve that is to go into debt by having early retirement programs. We have increased debt by, we have some $18 million of debt we went into through early retirement. So, and it will eliminate programs like police and VAPA and so forth in the following year. So the question is this survival? Is this solvency today? Well, maybe it isn't insolvency technically, but it's not solvency in my view. So the question is, what are our options? Mr. Beiser said, and the board said, we only have one option. Full speed ahead, damn the torpedoes, never surrender, because it's about winning the next day. The other option is to do the irresponsible thing. And the irresponsible thing is to keep 1,600 employees on that we can't afford to pay. We cannot afford to pay them. And what that would do is trigger the process of insolvency. But what it would also do is when we go into insolvency, we would have a full complement, or at least this year's level, of teachers, counselors, nurses at the same level as this year. We would not sell in a fire sale next year $20 million of our real estate, and we would not, and we can hopefully enter into long-term leases to generate revenue, and we would not eat up all those reserves. And yes, a state trustee process would come in and start to take over. And so the difference is whether 1,600 of you all are gone or 6 of us are gone. That's the choice that we have. And you know what? My proposal is a radical, crazy idea. It is. It's not a good idea. I believe it's a less horrible idea than the options that the board and that we're going. So what I would request and urge my colleagues tonight is to say we do have an option. We can decide that if this is not about the survival of the San Diego Unified School District as an entity. It shouldn't be. Because what is that except our teachers, our assets, our bank account, all those things, which we are throwing them all out. So I know this is a terrible decision for every one of my colleagues, and every one of them, I'm sure, have had the same sleepless nights I've had. And I'm not trying, but there is an option. And I'm asking Ms. Jackson, this is your last budget as a school board member after you served honorably on this board. This is the last one. And the opportunity is to maintain our assets, our reserves, and our classes. And Mr. Beiser, who has reminded us more than anybody, because you're in the trenches of what the impact of class size is. And Mr. Barrera, who has fought truly more than anybody to scrape and scratch for every rabbit he can pull out of the hat and every trick all the way down to alchemy in order to find the money to keep us going. And Dr. Evans, who I've had some differences with of late, who I believe is a man of great integrity and great honor, but we do have an option. And the option is to sacrifice, yes, the San Diego Unified School District as an organization as we know it, and our jobs, superintendent's job, in order to maintain the school level as it is and to maintain our efforts. So I would urge my board colleagues to vote against this motion and to start the process of rebuilding this district. Thank you.
Okay, are there other board member comments?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to, in terms of responding to Mr. Barnett, the way I see it is we have a car, our San Diego Unified School District. It's a very good car, and we're very low on gas. The state's not giving us enough fuel to operate it. But the solution when you're running low on gas is not to push the car over the cliff. The solution is to find out how you can keep it going with a little bit of gas and as he said, work to fight another day. We are poised to issue a large number of layoff notices, and you deserve to know why. I've received many emails and texts and phone calls from teachers and other employees. I've been in meetings. I've talked with many people. And the simple answer is we do not have enough money to pay all of our employees next year. And I told one teacher, we could recall you back, but we would not be able to pay you. We are $122 million short. I know we've heard comments questioning that, whether that's accurate and so forth. We have opened our books, and we have encouraged all of the unions to send their best professional auditors to meet with our finance people. I understand everybody's position in terms of finance gobbledygook. It's very complicated. It's complicated for board members. It's complicated for the public to figure out exactly everything that's going on. But we can have meetings between our staff and any professional auditors from the union to go over and find out and acknowledge that we do have this problem. And as long as 1 year ago, the leadership of the San Diego Education Association acknowledged that we were going to have a very serious problem in 2012-13, and we were going to need to work together to sit down to find a solution. Now, we've had the presentation on the number of layoff notices, and the staff has done the best they can to present it as clearly. This board has made it very clear. We do not want over-noticing. We do not want one more layoff notice issued than is necessary. And this is all accounted for here in terms of the number of PKS that are eliminated. We have the situation with the leave of absence people. We haven't determined exactly who is coming and going. One of our commitments and the commitment of HR is to have the right person at the right school to get, if anyone is called back, to get them back to their original position, and this needs to be done very carefully. But here is the reality. In this budget, we have had to eliminate 1,085 teaching positions because we don't have the money to pay those teachers. And those positions are not going to come back unless we find a solution between all of us. And to do that, as Mr. Beiser was saying, we need to sit down together to go over the problem, the district staff, and the unions, and come up with a solution. This is a sad day when our state, and we have to say our state because we're all responsible for what's happening in our state instead of pointing fingers. In our state, we are turning our backs on the education of the children of California. And as a board, we will continue to fight with you for our fair share of the state budget in Sacramento. But right now, we have a very real and immediate problem, and we cannot count on Sacramento. We have to find a local solution. As a district, we cannot print money. If we could, we would. We would have a 5-0 vote. Everybody up here would start writing checks, and we would keep our educational mission going as it is now. We cannot vote away the budget shortfall. We all waited for the governor's May revise. In years past, it's been better. This time it was not. It was actually a little worse. We have to face reality, and this is the reality we're facing. We have to do the best we can under these circumstances. So we need to move forward. This today, on May 22nd, we have some time, but we need in the next few days to get going with these conversations so that we can come up with some sort of an agreement by the middle of June to save these positions. I continue to believe that there is time. This is the 11th hour. But I truly believe that in San Diego we can work together for the common good, and I truly hope and pray that we will. If there are no more comments, please vote on the motion.
As amended.
As amended. by Mr. Barrera, which includes, in case anybody doesn't remember, the fact that as soon as any budgeted position opens up and is available and can be done reasonably according to the recall process, that will be done without coming back to the board, that position will be restored as soon as possible, getting the right person in the right position.
If the word was immediate.
Right. Right. And the fact that it does not need to come back to the board for approval. Okay? Got it recorded? Okay, please vote on the motion. Okay, the motion passes 4-1. That concludes our business for this meeting. Thank you, everyone, for attending and for participating.